Some of the things that will be outlined or what you will be able to do after today's session is that you'll be able to identify when job costing system is appropriate to be used. And will be also looking at recording of the cost within job costing and calculating the profit or loss per job. Because at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is to identify the cost related to a specific project. And once we have done so, you are able to price your product and you're also able to calculate your profit or loss. So job costing, it's a system costing system. And as I've mentioned, some of the things that we'll be looking at, it's the description of the job costing, the flow of documents within job costing, and manufacturing cost flow within the ledger. So that goes with the recording of the cost. So definition of a product costing system is a specific method according to which manufacturing cost of a single product, job, or product or group of products or jobs is accumulated, processed, and recorded. So this just means that a product costing method is just a way for us to be able to use this method to quantify how much did it cost for us to produce or manufacture
20%.
this specific product or job, right? And it's an accumulation of those costs that we'll be looking at. All right, so I'm going back to say that all we're trying to do is to quantify our product or our job. And sometimes this product costing works for a specific job or a process. So that's why I think if you look at your topics, there's job costing and then there's process costing. And then we'll see what is the difference between the two. But product costing is just for us to quantify how much did it cost for us to produce either a single product or a group of products. Okay. Sorry. Cool. Then we are looking at what's the differences between a job and a process costing in terms of the decision that you will have to make when you're using this product costing system. What does it depend on, right? First of all, you need to consider the market. Are you making a special assignment, a job for a particular client, or are you making a product for a market in general? If you are looking specifically to a client's need in terms of making a tailor-made, it's either a dress or a tailor-made car or anything that will be a thing whereby after you meet the requirements of the specific client, you can't sell it to anyone. It's specifically for the client. That's when you will use job costing. Okay. And then if you're making it for the market in general, meaning everyone, you just saying that this is my market, they like this type of t-shirts, or this is my market, they like this type of cars. You would go into process costing. So an example would be that, for example, I'm just gonna use cars. So let's say Lamborghini, somebody I go to Lamborghini and say that I want a pink Lamborghini and I want the seats to be orange. I'm just being a bit too extra, but just picture that. I want that and I want my ceiling to have my initials, all of those. That would be a thing whereby when Lamborghini cost me, it will show that it's particular to me as a client, because they can't just produce pink Lamborghinis with orange seats for everyone. It will be specific. Or a private jet. I would be saying that I want my private jet to have a kitchen, I want it to have a bed, I want this. It would be specific to that client. That's when you will use job costing. Whereas with process costing, it's 3 Series, BMW, everyone wants it. So it will be general market. They will make them the same. It might be different colors, but the making of that car is the same for that specific target market. So I hope that is clear. So always think about it. When it comes to job costing and process costing, you need to consider your market. Who am I making this thing for? Is it for a specific client or is it for general market? Then you'll be able to distinguish which one do you use. Okay. Then, excuse me, I actually just wanna use my pointers if you don't mind. Sorry, cool. I'm struggling with using my mouse. Cool. Then you have to think about the production, number 2. So we've considered the market. Now we need to consider the production. So when it comes to the production, you have to ask yourself, is this a specialized process or is it a continuous process? Okay. So if it's specialized, it's normally a once-off order. People come, they've got specific needs, and that client will say, I want it this way and that way, and it's a once-off process. If it's a once-off process, you just know that automatically it falls under job costing. It's for that, it's once off and then done. But then if it's a continuous process, you would think of process costing. So like I'm saying, it's a batch of things that you continuously need to make sure that you are always meeting this general market's demand. Whereas normally with a particular client, it's a once-off. So I could make maybe a practical example again, that if normally, I hope you can relate, normally when it comes to, let's say, traditional weddings, one would say that I've got this specific cloth, I want to make something, a dress for this occasion. Then you go to your tailor to say that this is the specific, this is how I want my dress to look like. Remember, particular client, special assignment. And it will be a once off because it's only for that wedding. And then they make that dress, then you're happy. So for that tailor, they would know that this is once off and it's specialized to this particular client. And the other example would be, so that would be a job costing. But then if same thing, it's a wedding or it's an occasion, I would just go to a specific clothing retailer and just say that I like this dress, and there will be multiple dresses to choose from, and then I'll just choose a dress and then I go dress up. But then there will be multiple and various dresses, whereas here it was specialized and it's a once-off order. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So things to consider, it's the market, it's the production. And then the last one is that the product itself, is it specialized or is it a unique product? If it's a unique one, it's the same thing with the dress. I would be different from everyone at the wedding. Why? Because I've got a specific fabric, different prints on it, different style of that dress, and I will be unique. No one will have a duplicate of what I would have made. Whereas under process costing, we will all look alike. I would go to a Zara, buy a dress. I find the Mpo is wearing the same dress. So I'm making an example. So that would show that it was for a general market. They make these type of dresses, multiple different kinds. And then if I go to that wedding, we will all look alike. It's a risk, right? That's why people sometimes when it comes to certain events, they like being particular, being unique, and making those specialized ones of orders. So I hope that makes sense. So that's how you would distinguish the difference between when to use job costing and when to use process costing. The market, the production, and the type of product that you will be making. So why am I spending a bit of time here? Is that from reading the questions, you should be able to identify, is this job costing or is this process costing? You will see with the context that they give you about that specific company, you will be able to see that am I going to be required to use job costing or am I going to be required to use process costing? I hope that makes sense. And for me to be able to know which one to use, I will be looking at these three things that they will give you that type of hint from from your paragraphs. That's why I always say that from the question papers that we have, they don't waste ink. Everything that they write there is normally an indicator for you to get a bit of context so that you know what type of cost method you need to use. So now, since we are covering job costing, process costing comes after job costing. Let's look at what job costing is. So job costing is a method of calculating your cost per unit. Calculating the cost per unit is used where goods are manufactured according to the client specifications. That is where heterogeneous or different, so you don't have to be sticking to the big terms, but different products are manufactured using the same production facilities. So, like I was saying, a Lamborghini, it's the same production facilities, but then people can come with their specific uh, demands or requests for that product to make sure that they are distinguishable, they are different from whatever that they produced. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Any questions before I move on to the flow of documents? So now the flow of documents. So within job costing, this is the flow. If you're doing auditing, it will make sense to you, but then also we'll just try to cover. You'll see how these subjects are somewhat interlinked, right? But anyways, so the flow of documents within a job costing system is that there will be a requisition that is being prepared for this specific order, right? That requisition is you filling in as to, sorry, your specifications. I want my windows to be tinted. I want my car seats to be stitched in white. I need the color of the car seats to be orange. I need, you are specific as to what is it that you want. So there's a requisition form that's being prepared for this special kind of order. And then a production order, which would be like a job card, is opened for that specific client, right? And it's initiated so that the job can be done. Then the resources that are utilized are recorded into 3 documents. So after a person has filled in the requisition, there's a production order form that's being initiated, and it is then separated into 3 documents. And this is the material requisition for me saying that I want this type of tinted glass, windows, and also, excuse me, this type of car seat, the type of material that they use, there would be a material requisition for that. And also remember the skill set, not everyone can do whatever that I want. So there will be a direct labor time card for someone who will be doing this. And then there's overhead allocation statement. So those are the 3 documents that will fall under this production order to ensure that they've covered everything, that they know the specific materials that will be required. They know that they've opened a job card for direct labor and also an overhead allocation statement. Okay. Then, and this would be for that specific order. All right. So it's not for orders, but it's for all. I mean, it's for one specific order. Then the production costs are accumulated in the accounts department on this job card. And then the job card forms the basis for calculating your unit cost and also for valuing your inventory and also for cost of goods sales. I mean, yeah, cost of sales. So it is a bit different to what we are used to, because what we are used to mass production, meaning you just make um just one form is for all, but in terms of job costing, it's particular to that specific job that you will be doing. So now even the 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 documents will be different because it will be for that special order that you're making. Okay. So this is an example as to how it look like. So we can look at this diagram that is inside your module on page 210, and then thereafter we'll be looking at activity 13.2. So here it was showing that there's different jobs. There's job number one and there's job number two. In this instance, you'll see that there is a direct material inventory T account, but then there will be an opening balance, and then there will be a thing of showing that we've purchased the new material. And once that is being debited into this the T account, you will see that they start separating it to say that um, the material cost for job one goes into the job one T account. Material for job two will go to job two. Material for job five, it will go to job five. So you have to be specific as to the issuance of this material goes to the specific job that you'll be doing. Even with the labor, as much as you'll be able to, from the accountants, it will show that they've paid salaries or wages, but they still need to separate it to the specific jobs. Okay, so let's look at diagram inside your module. So as you can see from here, it's what I've been explaining, that you will still have your T accounts for material, you still have your wages T account, your manufacturing overheads, and your indirect labor, all the things that we've learned. However, it's just that from these T accounts, you will need to show and be specific as to which job do they go to. Then once you have, let's look at job one. Once you have all your cost in, your direct labor, your allocated to the specific job, it's then you will find that you will say, okay, fine. Now we've made those stitched leather seats. This specific person did the work. These manufacturing overheads have been allocated to specific job. Now we're done. Then what? Now we've got a completed Lamborghini, and then where does it go? It goes to, if you can just follow here, it goes to this um, finished product T account. It will show that job one is done, and once it's done, it's then transferred to your cost of sales. All right, so I hope you can follow the logic. So summary, so what we just said is that there will be T accounts for all the costs incurred, right? When the materials are being purchased, when people are being paid, when there's been manufacturing overheads, and so on. Then once you know all the costs, you start transferring to the specific jobs. Job 1, 2, and 5. Job 1 will have their specific direct material, direct labor, manufacturing overheads, and once that is done, you will then say that it's a completed good. And then once it's a completed good, you transfer it to your finished product T account. Once that it's reflected, you then transfer it to your cost of sales because you're saying that it is ready to be sold. So I hope that makes sense. So let's look at activity 13 point. Sorry, I said 13.2, but before 13.2, it's the same thing that I just explained here. On activity 13.1, it will be KTUA's printers issuing materials. There's job A, B, and C. So what you will do in terms of your general ledger, which is very important that you know how these costs are being recorded, you will see that all the material account will show that we've got 800 worth of material, right? But you will need to create a cost ledger specific to those to those jobs to show that job 1, material 1, job 2 cost was 300 and job 3 was 400. So inside the general cost control accounts, it will be all lumped up. But when it comes to the cost ledger itself, that's when you will start making those splits to say there's job 1, job 2, and job 3. So I hope that makes sense. All right. So now I wanted you guys to to do activity 13.2. And as we always do our activities, I will read the activity to you. We will look at the required, but then and then I will give you a specific time allocation as to how long you should do the activity. You do the activity and then you start. That's when you guys now need to talk because I want to see how you guys approach questions. So you will attempt the question and then you give me your thought process as to how did you get to your answer. Then we look at the solution together and then we'll see where you were stuck or where you got it right. And then we discuss wherever you got stuck, if that's okay. All right, so activity 13.2, Masinya Printers uses a job costing system. So they tell you here, they didn't give you that context that I was saying, that sometimes the context will lead you to say that this is job costing. They tell you here that Masinya Printers, they use job costing. The following information is available for the first month of trading. Okay, so let's look at the first month of trading. So they show you this is the material purchases that they made, 42,600. The material was requested as followed. Then this is where they split it to say job 1, it was 16.9, job 2 is 17.3. Then there's indirect material, which they didn't indicate it's for which job. So we're just assuming it's for all jobs, it's 4.3. Okay, that is the breakdown of that 42,600, excuse me. Then they give you an extract for the wages that were paid. So they show that for job 1, it took 249 hours. Therefore, this is the total cost. Job 2, 273 labor hours. And that is for job 2. And then indirect labor, they don't indicate, they give you the total amount. Okay. Then overheads are allocated on basis of direct labor hours. So they gave you the basis, what your denominator will be when you start allocating your manufacturing overheads. Then they give you the budgeted average manufacturing overheads being 27,000 per month. So from this, you can see that this paragraph is alluding to you using the traditional method and not ABC to allocate your manufacturing overheads. The basis is direct labor. They gave you the budgeted average manufacturing overheads and the amount is 27,000. And they estimating that the normal average capacity is 600 labor hours per month. So there you go. You can then do your allocation rate from here. Then, so that's how they allocate their overheads. Then they say that for job 1, 300 units were completed. This is what went to your cost of sales. So your finished goods for that month was 300 units, and then 200 units were sold during that month. So this is what they produced, and this is what they sold. So already you can see that you have your closing inventory of 100 units. And they were sold for 130 Rand per unit. So they're giving you the sales price, selling price. Job 2, however, is still in process at the end of the month. So they don't tell you as to how much was it paid. They only give you the material and the labor and the overheads, but it's not yet completed, so it's still a work in progress. The following expenses were debited to the overheads control account. There you go. So overheads, you'll be given electricity and water, depreciation, and the factory rental. Sorry. Okay, so let's just summarize before we look at the required. So what am I given here? So this is a printing company, and they're using job costing. They've given me material purchases, and we're able to split it amongst direct material and indirect material. Under direct material, I've got job 1 and job 2 specific costs. Then they've given me direct labor. They've given me wages that they paid. They gave me direct labor and indirect labor. Under direct labor, they split it amongst the 2 jobs. Then they told me how overhead is being allocated. They gave me the budgeted overhead, manufacturing overheads, and also the denominator being the labor hours. Then from this, I can have my estimated allocation for manufacturing overheads. Okay, then they told me what's been completed for job 1. For job 1, 300 units were completed, 200 were sold, and they gave me the selling price. However, job 2 is still a work in progress. Then the last bullet, they gave us overhead costs, and these are made out of, these are the actual ones, right? Actual expenditure. Here it is. So they're giving me electricity, depreciation, and the rental. So from this, you can see that from getting my allocation, then for manufacturing overhead allocation, I might have my estimated manufacturing cost here, but then there, after getting it, I might have to now do an under or over if they are asking me that. If they do ask me the question. So that's the information that they gave me. Now let me look at what do they require from us. A, they require you to calculate the total cost for job 1. Give us the total cost. Now you must think total cost is both direct labor and material, and also your manufacturing overhead. So they want total cost for job 1 and the cost of the work in progress for job 2. Okay, at the end of the month, and you don't have to use T account. So give us the total cost for completing the 300 units for job 1. Give us the total cost for the work in progress for job 2. That's all they ask you. And then they say that calculate the profit and loss for job 1. Remember job 1, they gave you the selling price and they told you how many units were being sold. So give us the profit and loss for that sale. Then C, remember what I've said, is you need to give us the over and under recovery of the overheads for that month. So this is not specific to job 1 and 2. It's a combination of saying, after you've calculated your estimated overhead manufactured cost, compare them to your actual, tell us if it's an over or under recovery. So all I need is only those 3 questions being answered. I will give you 20 minutes to attempt the question, and then after the 20 minutes, we can then discuss the solution.
I've got a couple of questions, but I'll go through what I understand, and then I'll ask you the questions thereafter.
Cool. So how do you go about doing the total cost for the job?
Okay. As for the calculation for the overheads, because the direct material and the direct labor was already given to us.
Cool.
So on point number 4, it did mention that overheads are allocated on basis of direct labor hours.
Yeah.
But we were given the manufacturing for both products,
Yes.
and even the hours, it was for both products. But we needed to find out how much is it going to cost us for job 1 and for job 2.
Sorry.
So that's why we had to take the 27,000 for both products and find how much is it paid for per hour.
Yeah.
Okay, so because we were given as to how many hours we're supposed to work on job 1 and job 2, so we got the 45 rand per hour. So we took that 45 rand divided by multiplied by 249 hours for job 1. And
Mm-hmm.
then that's how we came to 11,205.
Correct.
And then as well as for job 2, which is the 45 rand per hour multiplied by 273 hours, which we got 12,285. Yes. And then so on our calculations to get the total cost for both jobs, so we added the direct material and the direct labor plus the overheads for job 1, which is 11,205, and the total cost was 40,605.
Correct.
Yeah. And then for job 2, because we got 12,285, so our total cost came to 43,295.
Correct.
Yes.
So any question regarding A? Because you got all the answers correctly, and your thought process was correct to say that total cost, it involves your direct material, your direct labor, and your overheads. The only thing that was tricky here was that you need to determine what their overheads were, and for you to do that, you had to do the traditional method by getting your budgeted rate per hour, and then thereafter apply it to the specific hours of those jobs so that you can be able to allocate it.
Yes.
Yes, sorry, and then you get your total costs. For job 1, it will go to your finished goods, and then for job 2, it will go to your work in progress. So you were able to do that. So congrats on that one. And then profit or loss on the sale.
Okay, so that's where I also have questions
Okay.
because I see on the solution there, they divided it with 300 units. Is it because that's what we produced, but we only managed to sell
Yeah.
200 units?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's what they did. Yes.
okay, all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, because I didn't finish it because I wasn't sure of how they came about that. Why did they divided with the 300 units?
Yeah. So with this, it was an apportionment relative to what's being sold, trying to get the cost of the unit sold. So that's why it was mainly just an apportionment specific to the 200 units.
Okay.
But you need to get the cost for goods sold. It's similar to when you try to get your, it's similar to the previous topics that we touched on. I think it's under direct labor and but it was direct labor versus absorption costing, because you have to get, for your cost of sales, you need to apportion it, but you make it relative to what you've produced. So here it was saying that what is the cost specific to the units that we sold. So for you to do that, you'd have to take all your costs, divide by what you produced, and then you times it by the units that you sold.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then the unders and overs, it's literally taking the cost that you calculated, that overheads, the estimate versus your actuals, and then you will see that there was an under recover. Why? Because what we estimated, it's lower than what actually was expensed for that specific month. Hence, there's an under recover.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Right.
I would say that it wasn't that much of a difficult question, but it was illustrating to us as to how to think. You still apply the principles from the previous units that we've covered. The only thing is that now, to say job costing, you are allocating costs specifically to that product that we produced.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you look at it, there's nothing foreign from what we know. It's just to say that you are specifically allocating this cost to this specific product that we did or job.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your attempt. You did well. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So now I'll continue, and then we wrap job costing by looking at one exam question. It's a multiple choice, so it should be quick, and then we'll just go through certain questions that are inside the module. Then we should be able to wrap up job costing. All right. So in summary, so this is just summarizing what we need to know about job costing. You need to know when to use it, where to use it, know the flow of documents, and then know the flow of recording your costs. That is literally the crux of job costing. So when do you use your job costing? It depends on the market, the production, and the product. That's what I covered when we started, that you start to think about the market. Is it a specialized one? Production? Is it also specialized? Product? Is it unique? Then you'll be able to know that this is the time that we are using job costing. Where to use it? You can use it in manufacturing companies, service orientated, and consultancy. It's the same thing. It can be applicable to diverse industries. It's not only limited to manufacturing. Whether it's in banking or insurance, they do still have certain offerings that they would have for specific customers that they have. So it's not limited to factory like or production like industries. Then the flow of documents, we've spoken about it. There's different documents that are used, the requisitions, the production order, all those things that we've mentioned at the beginning. Remember the flow of your documents. Then you must also remember the flow of your cost through your general ledger account. So you'll see how you record your costs and also how to calculate that profit. The profit, as you saw, it is specific to the units that you've sold. You take the cost relative to all the products that you've produced, but then you apportion it and make sure that it's specific to the units that you've sold. So I hope that makes sense. So once you understand clearly all these 4 things for job costing, you should have a clear understanding as to how it works. So now I want for us to look at the exam paper. It was the October 2013. It is question 1.5. It's a multiple choice. Normally job costing, from what I've seen, not to say that they wouldn't ask it as a full question, it's normally in your multiple choice question, and you cannot afford to lose out on 2 marks, right? So I'm gonna ask you this because 2 marks is around 4 minutes or so, but it's let me see. Remember I told you that you say 1.2 multiplied by the marks. So it's about 2 minutes, 2.4. Sorry about that. It's about two minutes. So to spend on this 1.5, to spend on this question. So I'm going to ask you, and then you will tell me which option is it. Okay. And then you would have done this. Cool. You. Okay, cool. All right. So Jumbo Plumbing Services is in the process of implementing a costing system and requires the expertise of management accountant. So this is where you come into the role. So Jumbo Plumbing, they want your expertise as a management accountant as they are starting to implement a new costing system. And their manager, P. Postman, approaches you for advice. So he's asking you which of the following statement is not true about job costing. So which one from the options that I will be telling you now is false about job costing? So A says that job costing is appropriate where homogeneous products are manufactured using the same production facilities. B, job costing is appropriate where heterogeneous products are manufactured using the same production. C, a common example of a business where job costing is applied is at a workshop where repairs are carried out on different vehicles and where the cost of repairs to each vehicle is calculated separately. Last option, job costing is not appropriate in industries where large quantities of similar products pass through a single process or consecutive processes is in the cost of production. So which one out of this option is false?
I think I would have to go for A.
Yes, it's A. Why? Homogeneous says that it's the same. Heterogeneous says that it's different.
It's different.
Yes. So you are correct. Job costing is not appropriate for homogeneous products because that is process costing. So you are correct. So you are literally on a good track, Mpo, when it comes to costing. Let me look at, let's look at question 2 together. And then we close off this, and then I start touching on a bit of process costing for the last 30 minutes. So let's just look at question 2 together. And then if you have any questions, you let me know. So you don't have to attempt this one. We'll do it together. Cool. So BMX Limited uses job costing to accumulate cost for their tailor-made range of products. The normal average capacity is 5,000 labors per month, and the budgeted average is around 175 per month. Overheads are allocated on the base of labor hours. Already from this first paragraph, you can see that chances are you'd have to calculate same thing, estimated manufacturing rate, overhead rate, because they've given you the budgeted average overheads and the normal average capacity, and also the basis as to what your rate will be based on. In July, an order was received, job 103, to manufacture 250 units of item X. The costing section carried out the following calculation of the estimated direct costs to complete this job. And these are estimates. So they tell you material per item X is 131 Rand. The labor per item X is 7.5 hours at 15 Rand per hour. So these are the estimated direct costs for this specific order. The following relevant actual information is available for July. These were estimates. These are the actual info. All materials required to complete job 103 was issued at 140 Rand per item, whereas the estimate was 131. However, only 200 units were completed and transferred. So instead of the 250, they only managed to produce 200 units. A total of 1,600 hours were worked. So these are the actual hours to complete the 200 units. Manufacturing overheads for the month were of the total 192. So now you got the actual manufacturing overheads. Probably you will have to compare it against what you've estimated here. Let's continue. In the course of the month, 5,600 labor hours were worked at 16 Rand per hour, whereas the estimate was 15 Rand per hour. So you can see that it's either we spent higher than what we anticipated or we spent lower. But so far it seems like we spent higher on the material and also higher on the labor hours. Okay, the job costing system operates as follows. The units completed on any order are booked to the completed inventory at estimated costs when they are completed. So this is how their system works. They don't work on actuals, they work on estimated cost. Inefficiencies whereby your actual might be more than your estimated in the production of completed units, they are written off as period cost. Now this goes back to the previous topics that we covered to say what are prime cost and what are premium cost and how do we treat them. So now here they're saying that if your actuals are more than your estimated, that difference is written off as an expense. It's as a period cost. It's written off as an expense as opposed to a cost of goods sold. Only when transfer to completed has occurred. WIP, work in progress for incomplete units, is carried at actual cost. So it's something to note that those that are completed, they are carried to the completed ledger, finished good ledger at estimated cost. And then any difference between the cost, the actual cost and the estimated is taken off as a period cost, right? Whereas those that are work in progress, they are carried at actuals. Very important to know. And then they ask us here to calculate the estimated total absorption cost for this job, and they want the cost per unit for item X. So they want us total absorption. It means that it will have your direct labor and material, and also your manufacturing overheads. So they want the total cost for job 103, and then they want the cost per unit for item X. Then we need to prepare a WIP account for job 103. Then we need to calculate the total over and under manufacturing overhead for BMX Limited. Okay, so pretty much straightforward. Let's see what is it that they wanted us to look at. So let's look at question 2 solution. Right, I hope you can see. So as I mentioned, total cost, absorption cost. This is the code for the job, right? Interestingly, this is the code for the job because this was an order that was made, right? So if this was the order that was made, you remember from what I've read, they said that they want 250 units, job 103. But your X is something we'll talk about it. But anyway, so job 103, we said that we wanted 250 units. So now you quote them on those estimated cost per unit as explained on top. So now, as I've said, total cost, remember, it's your material, it's your labor, it's your overhead. Material is straightforward, labor is straightforward. The only thing that was a bit different is the overheads. So you had to find this 35 Rand, and you get it by getting your budgeted overheads and you divide it by the normal capacity. Then you'll be able to multiply it here and get the total cost. And they said cost, so it's not per unit. Then after getting the total cost, for you to get the cost per item for X, you see cost per item means it's the total cost per item. You take the answer that you get here, you divide it by the number of units that was specific to this cost. So you see that it's 506 Rand. So I hope that makes sense. Straightforward. Total cost, remember it's material, it's labor, it's overhead. Your overheads, you use whatever method that they tell you. In this instance, we could all see that it was the traditional method being used as opposed to ABC. After you get your rate, you multiply it with what you've been given. Then you still have to go a bit further because they just didn't say give us the total cost. They said give us total cost and the cost per item. Then you take your answer, you get to the cost per item. When it comes to the WIP account, you must recall that they told you that for job costing, completed units, they are based on estimated, whereas the work in progress, they were based on actuals. So for WIP, you give them based on actual incurred. So your material, your labor, and now remember, as much as it's actual cost, your overheads, it's always on the estimated rate, the 35 Rand. So that's what you use, you get your answer. This is how your ledger would look like, right? Yeah, and then after they ask you to get your total over and under applied, it's always the same. You get your actual overheads and then you minus your overheads applied. And then you can see from here that we over applied. Why? Because your estimated overheads are more than all actual overheads. Are there any questions from what we looked at, Mpo? Any questions from your side?
So far, so good, Ndibi.
So far, it's straightforward. So I still say that that was job costing. I still say that job costing, you just have to understand that when to use it, where to use it, the flow of documents, and the ledger accounts. Normally asked in a multiple question, so that means that it's a bit straightforward. 2 minutes, you should be able to answer your questions that you are given around job costing. Okay. All right, so now we're done with job costing, and I thought that with the remaining minutes, let's try to touch process costing. It might be a bit of theory, but you look at what you can do. Right. So I'm just going to touch a bit of theory. Next week, we will still continue with process costing and look at the questions. Okay. All right. So process costing. Process costing is a costing method used to obtain record, report cost data in industries where large quantities of similar products pass through a single process or consecutive processes in the course of production. It's a bit of a mouthful, right? So with that being said, let's try to make sense out of it. So what is process costing? Process costing, it's literally trying to quantify the cost of products that are normally produced in large quantities. That means that there are a lot of them, large quantities, and these products are similar. They are homogeneous, all right? And the process can be either through a single process or consecutive processes. So what I'm saying is that there's three things. An indicator of a process costing is large quantities. Number two, similar products. And number three, the type of process can be simple or consecutive. Consecutive, that means the step number one, step number two, step number three. So let's say step number one, you do the structure of the car. Step number two, it gets painted. Step number three, it gets polished. Then we get a finished, a full car. Or it's a single process, it's just one step of doing that specific product, but it's in large quantities and it's similar products. All right, and they are produced in bulk. So these units are identical and are produced in bulk. Okay. And so here it is just an overview of some of the stuff that are within, some of the items within process costing. It's the use of, so some of the items is that you use process costing, there's single process, and then you get your unit cost calculation, and then, or it's consecutive processes that I've mentioned, meaning there's two or more processes that this product will go through. And same with job costing, you have to understand your flow of your GLs and then also your cost flows. All right. So that would be us covering process costing. Okay. All right. So process would consist of, there will be certain units that you input, and then they work on those inputs. They convert them by maybe a specialized type of labor, and there will be overheads that have been incurred, like your electricity or machine time, and then you get your completed unit over this conversion. All right. So as I was saying, certain material comes into it, then there's a conversion part, and then comes the output. That's process costing. So now this is an illustration of what I just mentioned, but this is under a single process. You will see that this is for the sake of your course. They've mentioned in your module that, so assume that your material is always added at the beginning of the process. But sometimes material can be added anyway. It's just that for simplicity of the module, they say that your material will be added at the beginning. So material will be issued and added at the beginning of your process. So when they are added at the beginning, there won't be any conversion cost because conversion is your labor and also your overheads, right? And then the conversion process will happen from here to there. This is where your labor and your overheads will come because we are trying to convert either this wood into a chair or into a desk, if you get what I mean. Then it will come to a point where it's complete. So process costing goes with the percentage of completion to say how far is this wood turning into a table, if you get what I mean. But this is an illustration, a diagram to show a single manufacturing process. Materials issued at the beginning, there's a conversion process, and then a completed product at the end. Also shows here, let's say with baking, which was an example, your raw material will be your flour, your milk, and your sugar at the beginning. Conversion process is you adding, beating the egg, putting the milk together, you whisking it, all of those. Probably from what I'm saying, you can hear I don't know how to bake. But anyway, you convert all this raw material into a dough, right? So you're busy mixing, there's a dough. After, so you mixing all your ingredients would be an indication of labor, right? And then comes a point where now you need to put all that dough and whatever that you've made, you put it on the baking tray, you sprayed that baking tray with butter. It's part of your conversion process. Put it into the oven. That's your machine time, if you think about it, and the electricity that goes into you baking that cake or those cookies. Put it into the oven. After whatever minutes there is, then you have your outputs, your cakes, your cookies, and. And when it's similar manufacturing process, from what I've mentioned with the example that we're making, you can make multiple of things depending on how big your oven is, because it's similar products and you can do them in batches, right? You can do them in bulk to say that you're gonna make cookies, you're gonna make muffins, you're gonna make, depending on those ingredients that you're making. But it's a single process and you're making batches of these outputs that I've just mentioned. So that's process costing. Okay. Even with cooking, same thing. If you think about it, I'm just making it simple to practical things that we face every day. So if you own a bakery, probably are using a single manufacturing process or those specific products that you will be making. Okay, then so now you ask yourself, with that being said, how do we quantify and get the cost of these cookies that we've made? What is the cost per unit of this cake or cookies that we just made? So it's important that you understand the total manufacturing cost for that specific period. Because remember, I said that with process costing, there's instances where we are looking at the percentage of completion. Like how far, if we get load shedding, I must just know that within this conversion cost, how much did I spend so far from just trying to make this cake? So with percentage of completion, I can determine that. And if there's no load shedding, I'm making an example, by the way. If there's no load shedding, by the time I get my full cake, how much did this process cost me? Get what I mean? And also, after getting your total manufacturing cost for that specific period, you must understand the number of units that you produced in that specific period. Like how many are in existence at the end of the process. So let's try look at activity 14.1. So 14.1, there's Fizizuela, sorry, can't pronounce it, Pty Limited. They manufacture popular fizzy drinks in a single process, and they make use of process costing system. Management obtained the following cost. So management obtained the following cost and unit data for March. And we are making an assumption that there's no opening or closing work in progress. So this is not an instance whereby by the time you start your process, you're starting with things from the previous process. You're dealing with this specific process and there are no opening or closing with. So these are the costs. They give you the material, they give you the labor, overheads, and as I've always mentioned, these three, they make your total manufacturing overheads. Total manufacturing costs. Then they give you the number of units that they produced for these popular fizzy drinks. It's 57,000. Question comes, calculate the cost per unit for that March. For March 2015. So they're saying using the introduction above, the cost per unit will be through taking the total manufacturing cost and you divide it by the number of units produced. So it's pretty much direct. So here it is. You take that 285, you divide it by 50,000, you get your 5 rand a unit. So it's as direct as that when it comes to your single process. Single process is straightforward. At the end of the period, you take all your total manufacturing overheads. That includes your direct material. In terms of making a cake, it's your flours, your milk, is your eggs. And then you take your direct labor, the person who's whisking and mixing this dough, that's your direct labor, how long it took them. Then your overheads is the electricity and either if it's a rental, wherever you were baking. So those are your overheads. You get your total manufacturing overheads. You divide them by your number of cookies that you produced or cakes that you've made at the end of that period. And that's your cost per unit. So it's straightforward. Now, that was the single. Now we're talking the consecutive. Remember I told you consecutive, it's different processes. There's process 1, there's process 2, 3, until we get to the final stretch. So with this one, let's see what they say. So in this one, looking at this one, this diagram talks about making coffee, right? So the process of making coffee is that you get your raw material. After getting your raw material, you add them at the beginning of the process. Process 1 would be you roasting those beans. So you get your coffee beans, you roast them. Output of process 1 would be roasted beans. You take those roasted beans, they become what? Your input for process 2. Start milling those beans. When you do them, so this is like crushing them. You crush those coffee beans, those roasted beans. What do you get at the end of that process? Your ground coffee. After getting your ground coffee, you get to process 3, where you're filling and sealing up your packaged ground coffee. So on process 3, you will have your foil bags ready, and your ground coffee becomes part of your input. You fill them up into this foil bag. Then at the final, you've got your product that is packaged and ready to be sold. So from there, you see that there's process 1, 2, and 3 into making coffee. So these we call consecutive processing. They follow each other. The final product of the previous process becomes your input in the next process. So let's hear what they say here. They say that in a process costing system, material, labor, and overheads has to be obtained, recorded, and reported. Materials has to be added at the beginning of the process 1, otherwise the process can't start. The output of one process, as I've said, automatically becomes the input of the following process. Additional material, your foils, your flavoring, could be issued to production at specific intervals. You see, it just came up process 3, and then they form part of the process. Conversion takes place evenly. So conversion takes place evenly through all the processes that are involved in this chain. So you see the difference. This one process, inputs are your raw materials at the beginning, conversion process, then you get your output. While here, your material, yes, they form part of your first process, but then your finished product of each process becomes the input of the next process. And there's these things of additional materials that can be added during these processes, like your foil bags or your flavoring. It depends on what you're making, and then of your input for the next process. So I hope that makes sense. So let's just look at activity 14.2. So 14.2 states the following. We just want to see how do you calculate your cost per unit under a consecutive process. So 14.2, it's Petrol Co. Limited. They manufacture aeroplane fuel in 4 consecutive processes using a process costing system. So there's 4 stages before they get to the final product. The following cost and unit data has been obtained from June. So they give you material added, and as you can see, the material is added at the beginning of process 1. Process 1 skips 2, 3, and then you see in process 4. Okay? Labor, it is evenly throughout all the processes. And also your overheads, because remember your labor and your overheads, they form part of the conversion costs. They are spread evenly. Output at the end of the processes is 250 kiloliters of production. Okay, so they ask you to calculate the cost per unit after completing each of these processes. So let's look at how is it done. Just the thought process so that you are aware of the difference between single and consecutive processes. Because single, we only look at one process and then we are done. But then we look at consecutive processes, let's see how it's done. So this is the structure as to how you would try to calculate your cost per kiloliter. Process 1, we are given material, labor, and overheads. We get our total manufacturing cost. Process 1, as you can see, it's similar to how you would calculate your cost under a single process. Get your total manufacturing overheads, get your kiloliters that you've produced, and you get your cost per kiloliter. Process 1. However, when you are moving to process 2, you need to take the total manufacturing cost from process 1 into the next process. Then you get your cost for that specific process. Why? Because it might be that things do happen where you have to finish off your process by process 2. You need to know how much has it cost me so far. Then if you do have, if you're fortunate to continue, you take the cost from the previous, you add it to the next. Same thing, process 4, and then you get to your finished product. So once we are done at the end, you add all your costs now. You add all your costs, and then you will get the total amount. Normally, it will be equivalent to your last process cost. So that's how it is calculated. And I can see that she's gone, but anyway, I'll just wrap it up for the benefit of the recordings. So with process costing, you need to understand your total manufacturing cost and know the units that you've produced. Know if you are doing it via single process or consecutive one. And once you've done so, you apply the 2 frame structures that I've just showed you. And that's it for the class. Thank you.